Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I take this opportunity, since I'm rising for the first time, to wish all of my dear constituents of Castle Central Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year. No doubt I will see them, Mr. Speaker, but this is the best forum where I can reach all of them and just say that, that their families will be in my thoughts and prayers over the Christmas season. I rise to support the motion presented by the Honorable Prime Minister to borrow monies to finance roads, repairs to schools, and housing. And, Mr. Speaker, I'm very mindful of the late hour and the great volume of work that we still have ahead of us, so I will be brief. I think that the importance of these projects that we're funding speak for themselves, but I do want to say something about housing. And I'm mindful that we celebrated yesterday, or we observed rather yesterday, the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, where housing is listed in Article 25, I believe, as a fundamental human right. And nowadays, Mr. Speaker, we have a whole new set of rights developing, and sometimes those agreed rights that are not controversial, which we have been working on for 70 years, seem very elusive to some people. And I'm talking about my constituents, who, many of them, Mr. Speaker, I would say have been denied the right to decent housing. When I walk around my constituency and I see the housing, the quality of housing that people in my constituency, and I'm sure around Saint Lucia, have to endure, it really, Mr. Speaker, is very sad. And we're talking about people in all walks of life. We're talking about teachers, policemen, civil servants, the staff who serve us, who work tirelessly, those we push hard to deliver results, those who prepare the documents on other works and programs that we work on. Some of them, when you see the housing conditions, it is sad. And if I may just read quickly what the article says, Article 25, everyone has a right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and his family, including food, clothing, housing, medical care, and necessary social services. The question of housing, Mr. Speaker, I find particularly disturbing. And I have determined, and I've expressed that publicly before, that this financial year, we focused on jobs in Castle Central and training. We will continue to do the work we're doing to make sure that we provide training and employment opportunities for people in Castle Central. Next year, we would like to focus on housing. And I just want to express how pleased I am that we have come here today to put this matter of housing on the priority list. Now, Mr. Speaker, I have had discussions with the Minister of Housing and with the Prime Minister, and I am confident that we will find an opportunity in this term of office, and certainly under this government, to ensure that we reach a sector of the population, if I may dare say, has never been reached in a housing program, or has never been satisfactorily or adequately catered for in a housing program. Mr. Speaker, I've heard of many low-cost housing programs in Saint Lucia under governments that have come and gone. But low cost is relative. For a segment of our population, there has never been low-cost housing that is accessible. And if we really do believe, after 7 years of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights being signed in 1948, that housing is a fundamental human right, it's time we do something about poor housing. And I would like to think that under this government, we had a successful conference, and in our party manifesto, we are committed also to the right to decent housing. Article 2.2, that certain basic economic and social needs must be met. These include, at B, decent and affordable housing for every family. And we affirmed these principles recently. And we've had discussions, I've had discussions with the Minister for Housing, and I am confident that we can do something about this. Now, Mr. Speaker, a house doesn't mean four walls. A house doesn't mean four walls and a roof. It means amenities, it means comfort, it means structure. And we're not saying that everybody must have a mansion. We're not saying that. We're not saying that. What has to happen is that we have to have a program where even persons who cannot face a bank, even persons who do not have collateral, even persons who do not have a guarantor should be able to access a minimum standard of housing. Now, that's very tall order because you're talking about resources, but it's time to have a program, to find a way, to find a creative way to reach the poorest of the poor, and it's possible. We have some ideas in Castle Central, Mr. Speaker, which I've already been discussing with the Minister of Housing. I'm hoping we can do a pilot to do that. And it is really important because if we are really talking about national development, housing is related to education. Housing is related to health. Housing is related to productivity. We can't grow this country unless we provide decent housing. The social science data shows it. Children who live in poor housing have more respiratory problems. They don't do well at school. How poor housing is linked to child abuse. A lot of children in our country are abused, are exposed to things they shouldn't be exposed to. Their innocence is robbed early on because of poor housing and overcrowding. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to suggest, and I indicated that we are working on a project in Castle Central where we must find a way to link housing, access to housing, to training and employment. We must find a way where we can lease a house to a poor family with an option to buy. We must find ways of reaching the poor who cannot face the bank or who do not have collateral. There has to be a minimum standard which we will say in this country that each family is entitled to. And we may not be able to achieve it in 3 years, we may not be able to achieve it in 4, or in 5, or in 6, or in 7 years, or even in 10 years. But we must progressively work to achieving that. So that's the point I want to make here today, Mr. Speaker, on the observance of 70 years of our commitment to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that housing needs to be actively pursued as a fundamental human right. So I wish to commend the Prime Minister and the Minister for Housing and the government on bringing this here, and I am confident that under this administration, we will begin to see housing reaching the poorest of the poor. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.